All right. Okay, so kind of ending with our EI component, I just wanted to go over some ways that if there's areas for improvement that you want to make or areas you want to work on, these are some of the recommendations on how to increase your emotional intelligence. Okay. And the first one is probably one of the most important ones that we have to do, especially as thoughtful counselors and therapists. And that's to listen to yourself and your emotions in an honest way. A lot of times we don't really pay attention to those emotional states because maybe we don't like them, or in some cases, we don't think we deserve them. And so really learning to listen to yourself and kind of going back to what we talked about with humanistic theory about really learning to be an authentic human being. And that doesn't mean you become the person that you ought to be, you become the person you are. And we can only do that through really listening to who we are inside and identify and classify emotions. So making sure that when you are feeling something, you give it that label, you give it that purpose. Note the difference between having and acting on emotions. Okay, this is the same as I feel something, but then what is my reaction to it? And noting that those are two separate things. Okay. Having an emotion is your body's signal that something either needs to continue, such as a good emotion, or something needs to change, such as a bad emotion. They're back. Are we back? Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Well, this is Lucinda. I lost you right there. Can't hear you.
Yeah, we lost you for a minute or two. Sorry about that. That was weird. Sorry about that, everyone. Welcome back. quick break there for a second. Okay, try and get this back. All right. So going back to learning to distract yourself, as I mentioned before we got cut off, emotions are what we call situationally bound experiences, meaning that they're not meant to be carried with you outside of the situation in which they occur. Okay. And the reason why a lot of, well, I'm not going to say some individuals have a difficult time with emotions is that they tend to carry them with them instead of understanding where they belong. Okay. And so a person has a bad experience with someone, and so they take that with them and they ruminate about it all day, which then tends to make the rest of their day very similar to that one situationally bound emotions. Okay. It's one of the weird things about modern living is we have forgotten that emotions are just signals. They're about the situation, the current situation that we're in, and that it should be there that that emotion is experienced and taken care of. So when it talks about learning to distract, it means once you have that emotional experience and you did something with that emotion within that situation, when you leave the room and you want to carry it with you, it's learning to say, no, I'm going to distract myself with something else. I'm not going to think about that anymore because that's where that emotion is supposed to live. Okay. Take times to note your impact on others. Now, this is that social part of emotional intelligence. I've had some individuals who measured low in emotional intelligence and stuff, and they went to work. They actually kept a notebook with them. And when they interacted with someone and it was an emotionally charged interaction, they would actually sit afterwards and think about how their reactions had an impact on them and vice versa. And they would journal that. Okay. This becomes important because we often don't really we kind of, how do I put this? We look for a response that we want and assume that the other person responds that way. And we can build it in our head that what we did was right or wrong. Okay. But actually sitting back and really taking a look at how another person responds to us when we're in a given emotional state, kind of in some cases it can validate that, hey, I can communicate good, I can get along with these people, all those kinds of things. In other cases it can be very impactful in saying, well, in this situation I do things right, but when I have this emotion, it seems like everything comes out wrong. Okay. And so learning how to then manage that, set goals internally or written, and slow down, think, and act. And this is kind of the last part about emotions, is that we have an emotion and we want to react on that emotion immediately. Okay. And this is where I want you to think of slow down, think, and act. Okay. I know in a lot of work situations where something happens and I'm very emotional, I'll go write an email. And in the past, those emails were not very well received. So what I've learned is when I'm upset about something, I go write the email and I leave it in a draft. And I'll come back to it a couple hours later or even the next day and look at it again before I send it. And that's something I've had to learn about myself, okay? Because I want to give that instant reaction. I want whoever's receiving that email to feel either my frustration or what's going on, but that's not always the way we want to approach a situation, okay? And in my experience, it doesn't work very well. And so think about this in the context that not everything needs an immediate response unless you're in danger, okay? Especially in our modern world, where where our stresses and everything else tend to be more chronically based. Nothing has to be resolved right in the instant when a high emotion is occurring. Okay. So what's that?
I just wanted to let you know, you're not recording anymore.
Oh, well, that's not cool.
I know. I think it was when we lost connection.
Let me reconnect. Thank you for letting me know that.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, we should be recording now. Okay, thank you for letting me know that. All right. So now let's get into some of the more details about the skills and everything that we've been talking about throughout the semester, but in a bit more detail than what we've described them thus far in the introduction, okay? So we're going to start again, going back to the whole ideas of attending and listening, and look at these in a little bit more detail. So when we talk about attending, okay, being attentive means that the counselor is giving the client their full focus and paying attention. And you're paying attention to what the client is saying, doing, tone of voice, and body language, okay? We're just not listening to the content of the message. We're listening to the message itself, okay? And there's some truth in this saying that 90% of communication is nonverbal, okay? And so, and again, as I talked about at the first of the semester, we can use things like body language, we can use things like tone of voice to tell how the client is, whether they're comfortable with the situation or not, whether they're regressing in a sense. And so these are all important aspects to consider when you're looking at when you're when you're working on attention, okay? So some key components to attending, of course, we talked about eye contact, okay? But we also talked about culturally appropriate practices when it comes to eye contact, okay? So even though in some cultures, eye contact is not seen as respectful, it may be seen as connected with a shame emotion in some cultures. If you can even get a millisecond of eye contact with someone, that's sufficient, even within a cultural context where eye contact is not seen as something appropriate, okay? And so when we look at eye contact, it's making that visual connection with another person. And it may be a millisecond, it may be an extended period of time, but it's something to kind of look for when you're connecting with your client, okay? When we talk about body language, we talk again about not only our client, but ourselves, making sure that we're in an appropriate open stance, that we're not slouching or tapping on the table or any of those kinds of things. And we're also looking at our client. Are they opening up? Are they bundled up in the corner of our office, right? Which is not a good sign, okay? Gestures. This is the gestures you provide, and also the gestures you get back from your client. So for example, I mentioned this at the beginning of the course. I have an issue when I start talking to someone, a lot of times I'll unconsciously fold my arms. Okay, this is not a good thing to do in a counseling session. Okay, I'm just saying that because it gives you a sense of you're being closed, but it also gives you a sense that you're a part of an authority type situation, which is, that's not how you want your interaction with your clients to be, okay? Facial expressions, and again, we're talking about the expression of our clients, but also our own, making sure that we have the right affect for the given situation. And this is where a lot of times people can mix up the difference between sympathy and empathy, okay? Because when someone's telling something really emotionally driven, it's really easy, or it's almost natural for us to give a sympathetic look, like a, oh, too bad kind of thing, right? And it's almost something, and it's something that as counselors we need to control, because we shouldn't be giving kind of feelings. We should be giving, I'm here in this journey with you. Okay. So pay attention to that when you're in an emotional, someone's telling you a deeply emotional thing, and notice your facial expressions and try to avoid doing the sympathy, feel sorry for them kind of look that we often give, and instead maintain a look of attentiveness. And I'm experiencing this with you. We're going down this journey together. Okay. And then tone of voice. Again, when we're talking about the client, we can tell tone of voice if they're getting more angry or frustrated, or if they're being calm. And remember that going back to our discussion with groups, the emotions that we want are in that mid-level. Okay. I know this sounds horrible, but we don't want people too happy and we don't want them too sad. We want them kind of in the middle, because that's where we perform the best. Okay. And that's where we do our best thinking. Okay. All right. So let's for a few minutes talk about rapport building. Okay. So we're attending good. We have that attention, and I didn't spend too much time on that because I feel like we're double dipping kind of from the first of the semester. But rapport building is to work. We need it to, of course, work well with our clients. We need to build some rapport for them. Okay. And this is regardless of what model of counseling you decide to adopt for you professionally. Okay. You'll see in any type of, even the most clinical types of cognitive behavioral therapy, or very strict manualized groups, that rapport building is still an important aspect of that treatment modality. Okay. So rapport means a sense of having connection with a person. Okay. And it helps, it will be helped and facilitated by how the counselor manages their own feelings towards the client and how they behave with the client. Okay. And so again, when we're talking about how we should be responding to a client, we should be modeling the interaction for them or with them, and give them a sense of, this is how I can interact and behave and have a good connection with another human being. Okay. So here is again the ways of building rapport. One is being well prepared for a session. Okay. Meaning that you're entering it, you're unrushed, you're calm, you're ready to prepare to be there, putting the client's own issues and problems out of the way. And for the duration of the session. Okay. The perfect schedule, if we were to say what is best practices for counselors, okay, it would be about 4 sessions a day maxed out in an 8-hour day. Okay. Because we should have a good hour between sessions. And the first part of that is to finish any client notes from the previous session. And then the next part of that hour off is to then prepare and be prepared for your next session. Okay. There's nothing more that ruins a good counseling session than when the counselor comes in the room with the client's files, and while they're sitting there, so tell me how you're doing today, and they're thumbing through the files to see, 1, who the client is, and 2, what they were talking about in the last session. Okay. If you want to ruin rapport with your clients, do that because it'll be an instant turnoff, if I want to use that term, because it's showing that you're not fully invested in the relationship with them. You're not fully there if you're constantly having to look them up in front of them and doing those types of things. So being prepared for the session is important. And that includes making sure your environment is prepared for the client. So you don't have files all over your desk, you don't have other distracting things going on, and that you're prepared for that. Again, when we look at the group session, we talked about making sure, you know, if there's coffee or something, that the coffee is there, it's taken care of, that the chairs are set up the way they need to be set up, and that the group members can come in and just immediately feel like they belong there, and that nothing needs to be taken care of. Okay. And that goes into the second one, which is make a safe and trusting environment. And this include, I do want to reverse back to going back to being prepared. This also means that you're personally prepared. Okay. Like I think I've said this in the class before I enter a room in a counseling session, I do this imaginary thing where I take all my troubles out of my head, my personal issues, my bills, mortgage, arguments with family members and stuff, and I put them in a bag and I set that bag outside the door, and then I walk through the door. Okay. Because that session is not about me. And if I drag all of my stuff into that room, then I'm not going to be the most effective at what I'm supposed to be. Okay. And that's the difficult thing about becoming a counselor. Okay. When you go to the doctor's office, they have all these measurement tools. They can draw blood. They can do all of these things to try and figure out what your sickness is or your illness is. Okay. You are those tools as a counselor. You are the one, you draw the blood, you draw out everything. You are the tool. Okay. And if you go into a session not remembering that you are the one that is supposed to be there to help that person, there's not going to be a magical medication that you're going to give to them at the end of the session or a prescription. You are the tool. You are the treatment. Okay. And that's something to keep in mind. Okay, make a safe and trusting environment. This includes taking the trouble to make settings appealing, offering a restful, clean, uncluttered, pleasant setting, perhaps a cup of tea. I love these things. Anyways, so again, in your environment, I would encourage you, if you're already in the field and you're seeing clients and whatnot, and you have your office and everything, to go into it and look and ask yourself, is this appealing to someone who's coming here for help, or is this appealing for me? Okay, because a lot of times we clutter up our desks and stuff with bobbleheads and all of these kinds of things because it helps us get through our day, but they can become major distractions for people who are entering into our space that need help. Okay, so making sure you have a nice, clean, uncluttered environment for them to come to is important. Okay, and this is actually becoming more and more true with children as well. It used to be the theory that a therapy room should be all colorful and have all of these things everywhere and all these and whatnot. And we actually found, even with kids, that having that overstimulating environment actually has a negative impact on the therapeutic relationship with a child. In fact, in most child therapy rooms, you want the room to be earth toned. You don't want any colorful carpeting. You want to make sure that the toys, if you're doing play therapy, are set up logically and easily for the child to access and use. And we found that even with children, if you overstimulate the environment, you're going to actually interrupt the therapeutic process with a child. So think about that, either whether you're going to work with adults or kids, that stimulation always isn't the best thing. Okay. Being aware of who the client is, including second and follow-on sessions, knowing the client's name, remembering key things about their issues. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is one area where I'm horrible with names. I'll remember your face, I'll remember what we talked about, but names is something that I always had a hard time with. Okay. So one thing that I used to practice is in my notes after the session, I would write down their name and then little comments about things that were significant to them. So maybe their kid was, I don't know, going to a swim meet or some athletic thing. So that the next week could just look at those 2 or 3 bullet points and remember something about that client that is also associated with their name. So doing those little mnemonic devices and whatnot to help remember the client and who you're going and who you're talking to, especially if you're going to work for a high volume organization. Okay. When I first got into the domestic violence field, we were seeing anywhere between 3 of us, we were seeing anywhere between 20 to 40 people a day. Okay, just between 3 of us. And remembering all of those became very difficult. So if you're going to work for a high volume type of organization, having these little mnemonic devices to help you remember your interactions with your clients, especially if you'll see them again, is important, because that helps them feel validated that what they're going through, despite if you're seeing 50 to 100 people in a week, that you take time to actually remember something about them has a real significant impact on the relationship you'll have with them. Okay.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So that include like, because if you're in a high volume setting, you know, I mean, what if there's, you know, you throughout an entire year, you know, maybe you're dealing with 10 Ryans, you know, and then, you know, so then it's, you know, like hard to associate with, but, what would be like a better way how to different, because I mean, you know, you see your notes and stuff like that, how would you differentiate between like the various names that you go through so that way you're not, you know, associating, because I mean, a picture or a person's face with the name, you know, it's different, but then when you're sitting there, you know, going over your notes and then that way you kind of focus, how would you better do that?
Well, especially if you're working high volume places, make sure that, you know, you have their full name, their first and last name.
Yeah.
That's what I used to do. I always wrote their full name, but then always in your session with them or in your conversation, I always made a bullet point about something they said that was unique to them, so that when they came back and I saw their full name, and I could look at my note and I could go, oh, okay, I remember this. and we could move on. So just writing down just something quick that was really unique that they said during the session helps a lot. And that actually, I found that also helps with the face recognition as well. So that you know that you're talking to the right Ryan, right? Because once you tie something that was significant to that individual, you'll more likely recognize them when they come back. So there are some organizations that I don't know if I agree with this, take pictures of the client and put them on their file or stuff like that, or in their portal, online portal. So there's ways like that you could use dependent upon your organization. But I always found that making sure you have their full name and then just writing down something unique that they said during that session was. Does that answer your question or help?
Yeah,
all right. Okay. All right. So some other aspects of building rapport is, of course, one is offering empathy, making an effort to be there with and for the client and trying to see how the client feels and sees things. Okay. And again, we're going to come back to this in another skill here in a while, where we do reflections. So the client says something. And again, I'd encourage you to practice saying this, because the more you say it, the more natural it becomes. Is once you've heard someone say something, simply saying, so what I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, da, 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 da. Okay. And again, in an empathy situation, one, it shows that you're trying to connect with the client. You're trying to experience what they're experiencing. And you're also empowering your client to correct you and to have permission to correct you. So in the beginning, when you try these reflection techniques and stuff like this, your family and friends are going to go, oh, you're doing that counseling thing on me. But I promise the more and more you practice it, the more natural it is, and it doesn't sound so clinical, as you would say. And so practice that quite a bit. Have an accepting manner. This includes remaining unshocked, whatever the client brings, being non-judgmental. However, much of client's behavior surprises or appalls us, offering that, again, this word, that unconditional positive regard for the client. However, they have been behaving or maintaining respect for another person. So again, working with individuals who, for example, have gone through trauma and those kinds of things, is sometimes they want to test and see if you're really going to be able to stomach, in a sense, what they've gone through. Okay. So if they're at a level where they just have been rejected by their world, and they will do what we call testing behaviors. Well, they will tell you their most horrific experience just to see your reaction. Okay. And what are they looking for? Is, can you accept this internal turmoil that I'm going through? Or are you going to be like everyone else and just go, oh my God, I can't believe that, or just freak out about it, or have a hyper reaction to it? Okay. Which indicates that you're not comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, your client's not going to be comfortable with you. So not a lot, but some clients who have been, again, continually rejected by other professionals, by family members and stuff, they build what I would call coping mechanisms. And one of the coping mechanisms is to test the relationship that they have with you by telling you something that should shock you and make you go into a reaction where you'll potentially reject them for that. Okay. And so maintaining a sense of stability in your own emotional reaction is really important. Okay. And remembering that even someone who has done something completely appalling, that doesn't define everything about who they are. Okay. So for example, when I worked for a while with addicts in the prison system, a lot of times they would bring up stories about how when they were heavily in their addiction process, they would sexually assault other people and stuff like that. And they would tell that over and over just to see what more my reaction is going to be. Am I going to then define them as a rapist? And that's all I'm going to see now. Okay. And the whole part of unconditional positive regard is saying, yes, that is something that they should have not done. They should have not engaged in that behavior, but that doesn't define them as a complete and total person. They still have values outside of those very poor decisions that hurt other people. Okay. And sometimes that's really hard to do. Okay. But it's something to kind of keep in mind, that you are there as a counselor, not as a judge. Okay. Or an investigator or a police officer. That's their job. Your job is to help the person heal. Okay. Being unrushed, allowing the client time, letting clients stay with whatever feeling comes up, and those kinds of things are important. Here in a few minutes, we're going to be, well, probably starting on Thursday, we're going to talk about silence, which is something that a lot of therapists, I think everyone kind of gets anxious about, when the room just kind of gets quiet all of a sudden. But we're going to talk about that here in a little bit, and about how important having a client just silently go through their emotional states can be, and how beneficial it is actually for the counselor. But in other situations, you know, again, looking at experience and trauma, there were times where a survivor was in my office, and for that 60-minute session, that person just cried because they needed to, and that was a safe place for them to do that. And they can experience that emotion. And in the end, we then could process it. And allowing that client to ride out their emotions and experience it in a safe environment is really important, okay? Being congruent, so being honest in a well-considered and kindly way, and not being brutally honest in confrontational or rude ways, okay? Now, when we say don't be brutally honest, I do want to just put a note in here about there are some therapies where I'm just going to use this term. If you have a kid around, please plug their ears. That there is parts of certain therapies where you call people on their shit, okay? But you're doing it very intentionally. Because what you're going to do is you're going to call them on that, and then you're going to challenge them on that, and then you're going to head towards some therapeutic goal, okay? But what that requires is a very strong therapeutic alliance, okay? And so when there is no therapeutic purpose behind being brutally honest, other than you just want that person to feel that brutal honesty, that's when you as a therapist need to sit back and go, no, I need to approach this differently. I need to approach this with a little bit more kindness, a little bit more appropriate manner. And we'll go over some ways you can do that here in a couple weeks. But remember that the notion of the time, there's a time for being brutally honest if it has a therapeutic purpose, and that's part of the therapy session that you're in, that you're going to be challenging thought processes and those kinds of things, versus being brutally honest because you think that that's what the person needs, okay? So know the difference between those two, okay? Be gentle, challenging dysfunctional beliefs and behaviors. So and if rapport is established, the client will grow to trust the counselor, and a good foundation is laid to real growth and healing to occur when you can actually challenge them on their thought processes and the way they're thinking about the things. But this needs to be established first, okay? All right, I think we're going to leave this for next time. So as I said, we were going to go into silence, but I think this is a good stopping point for today. So I'm going to stop.